right. Thank you all so much for making time to be here tonight. My name is Onisha Martin, and I am one of the board members for Farmington SAFE, which is Suicide Awareness for Everyone. And tonight's event is about Black youth mental health. And so I just want to give a little bit of background about how we came to this event taking place so that we know where we came from and what we're working to strive for to move forward, okay? So last spring, SAFE held a community conversation specifically focused on youth mental health in general. And during that conversation, we shared some really alarming statistics about the Black community and how numbers have shifted over the past 25 years in regards to suicide rates among our African American youth. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of that survey data, but before I do that, I want to also acknowledge that this is a heavy topic. So if you need to step out, you're absolutely welcome to do so. We will have some grounding exercises at the end of this at the end of tonight's presentation, just to kind of round us out after carrying such a heavy weight. But I just want to make sure that everyone gives themselves the opportunity to make sure that you're taking care of yourself as we're going through this presentation tonight. So survey data from the CDC's Youth Risk Behavior Survey in 2021 surveyed high school students across the United States, and 26% of surveyed students, of African American surveyed students reported poor mental health the last 30 days from when they took this assessment. 22% of surveyed African American students seriously considered suicide. 18% of African American surveyed students made a suicide plan, and 14% of surveyed African American students attempted suicide. And according to the Minority Health Report, in 2020, suicide was the third leading cause of death for Black Americans ages 15 to 24. Suicide rates among Black youth have risen faster than any other racial or ethnic group in the past 2 decades, with Black males between the ages of 10 and 19 having a rate surpassing 60% of suicide rates within the last 20 years. So it's a significant increase in the amount of African American males turning to suicide because they don't feel like they have some other alternative to address their needs. Researched associations of Black mental health range from access to quality health and mental health services, sexuality, community violence, and socioeconomic stress. And so to also kind of paint a picture about how things have been for the past 4 years in the African American community, I wanted to invite up Dr. Robin Floyd to give us some perspective as to how COVID-19 has impacted those rates as well. So Dr. Floyd.
Good evening, everybody. Okay. So, as we know, the pandemic came in as like a black storm. You know, we wasn't ready for all the effects that happened with the pandemic, but we were forced to face that. The lens that we look in since the pandemic occurred has forever changed our lives. The world we live in today is not the world we lived in yesterday. We know as adults it has been challenging, and just imagine for our youth. Research has shown that the rate of suicide among Black youth has risen, with Black children between the ages of 5 and 12 now being twice as likely to die by suicide compared to their white counterparts. The suicide rate has increased by more than 30% in the United States since 1999, and now the second leading cause of death among youth between the ages of 10 and 24. Despite having high rates of mental illness, Black youth are still less likely to seek mental health treatment. The pandemic has become a catalyst to psychosocial stressors experienced by Black youth that have contributed to increased rates of depression, anxiety, and stress. And with this being said, the pandemic also brought in fear of the unknown, national news alerts. As a nation, we watch daily national reports of data that became our normalcy. Exposure to massive deaths, numbers of deaths. It impacted our families, how we interact with each other. We were forced to change our times of our tours of duties. It changed our daycare, forcing some parents to have to stay home with their children. Forcing also increases of how we were purchasing food, and it just impacted our families overall. How our kids socialized. becoming I'm sorry. And also, pre-COVID, as a nation, we live without daily pandemic fear. We experience traditions such as graduations, proms, birthdays, weddings, graduations, celebrations, family reunions. Our socialization was at leisure. We were able to travel abundantly. School was normal for our youth. They were able to be students, to be youth, to be able to do sports and interact. Post-COVID, there was a national change that impacted our states and cities. The socialization of our kids, having to be at home, family roles change, the school dynamics changed, politics, the government, technology, our delivery services increased, morals and values, financial, inflation, family gatherings, not being able to see your grandparents, just things to consider of that. As a society, we know it is not easy to adapt to what we call our norm, then being forced to change. Transitioning is never easy and requires very careful consideration to avoid a life of undesired consequences. So questions that we need to consider. What strategies for our Black youth were put in place before any transition of change occurred? Did we have any support for our traditional learning that transitioned to virtual, to hybrid, and back to traditional learning again? How did we support societal changes that have impacted our Black youth, our millennials, our Gen Zs? So how do we help support our youth, the ones that did not get the chance to experience proms and graduations and families and not be able to have those memories? How can we support our youth visions moving forward? Educational milestones, scholarships, wellness, and well-being. How can we support their positive decision-making? Trust of the influencers, like the parents, schools, religious leaders, and providers. Our future approach. Who knows your youth better than yourself? Monitor your youth behavioral changes. Encourage conversations. Monitor social media practices of your youth. Identify your parental influence on your son or daughter. Mentally, seek clinical support if additional help is needed by a therapist, coach, school leader. Spiritually, reach out to your religious leaders, and the power of prayer we know is amazing. Emotionally, allow your youth to express internal feelings. It is important to validate how they feel. Most importantly, empathetic, non-judgmental listening and responses. Physically, encourage some type of exercise for your youth, walking and exercises such as that. Continue to empower and encourage your youth well-being. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Floyd. So now we're going to move into the juicy part that you guys actually came in here for. We have a couple of speakers that are going to be coming up to just kind of give some insight to some things that are going on in the community and ways that we can work to make some shifts with our children, okay? So our panel presentations for this evening include Mrs. Lorena Black, if you'd like to come on up and have a seat. And then we also have Chaplain Dorset, if you'd like to come up as well. And we're going to be shifting our program a little bit tonight. So we were going to start with panel presentations and then move into some breakouts, but so that we can appropriately accommodate the attendance that we have this evening, we're just going to flow a little bit with having both of them just kind of present in this space so everyone's getting access to all of the same information. Okay? So Doctor, do of you have a preference as to who starts? Or?
Ladies first.
Okay.
So am I going to just introduce myself now? We're going straight into everything.
We can start with introductions.
Okay. Well, first, I'll say who I am. My name's Lorena Black. I am a retired Army major, and I am the Vice President of Leadership Development for a nonprofit called Inforum. Our whole mission is accelerating women in their careers and really just fighting for gender diversity, along with diversity, equity, and inclusion in in its entirety, I'll say. I am a mother of 4 teenagers, so when I got the invitation to participate in this, I was like, absolutely yes. So I have an 18-year-old, a 17-year-old, and 2 15-year-olds in my house. So this topic is really important to me because I see the things that they're all going through and the struggles that they're facing right now. And so that is who I am. Thank you for allowing me to be here with you tonight.
Good evening, everyone. By way of introduction, my name is Chaplain Jamel Dorsett. I am the clinical chaplain at the John D. Dingle VA Medical Center in the wonderful city of Detroit. I am not going to go deep into my presentation right now, but I just wanted to introduce myself. I think the topic that I will speak on is very personal in reference to a family member of mine who committed suicide, and I'm looking forward to engaging everyone at this event this evening. So thank you for having me.
Forgive my awkwardness in this situation. I actually have some slides that I'm going to present, and I'm going to talk tonight about imposter syndrome, and that is something that in my role at Inform we talk to adults about, but I know that it affects all of us. So I have some, just give me one moment. As I'm doing this, can I ask, is anyone familiar with imposter syndrome and want to share what your definition of it is?
Not believing that you belong in a certain place.
So really, we talked about the definition of what is imposter syndrome, and it's that feeling of I'm not good enough, maybe I have anxiety, it's that is somebody going to find out and figure me out. And so carrying that around, whether you're an adult or a teen, it's pretty heavy. So it's really trying to figure out how to, the different ways that it may show up. So when we think about what causes it, there's a lot of external factors that come into play when we're talking about it. It could be your culture, maybe your native language, your socioeconomic status. Another big thing is like stereotypes that are put on us, especially as kids or even as adults, or even being in environments where we don't have role models that look like us. Like all of those things come into play, and they can just start wreaking havoc on how we're looking at ourselves. So when I think, what I'm going to talk about is 5 different variations of imposter syndrome. So there's something called the perfectionist, there's the superman or superwoman, there's the natural genius, the soloist, and the expert. So when we're thinking about the perfectionist, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's the very high standards, very low self-compassion. It's like, I have to be perfect. I need to do everything right. And whenever you don't, you really beat yourself up and feel really bad about yourself because you're not living up to that standard that you put on yourself, but you might think that somebody else also put on you. So it's identifying that. And once I go through all of the definitions, I'm also going to go through some ways to try to switch it up a little bit. So after we talk about the perfectionist, we look at the superman or superwoman, and that's, for adults, think workaholic. Kids, teenagers, I think you could look at it that way too, whether it's academically, you're just doing everything, joining every club, participating in everything, just really just trying to prove yourself in that way, and you feel like that's your identity and you need to do that. The harm of that is you can burn yourself out pretty quickly. So it's being mindful of that. The other thing that comes into play is you're constantly comparing yourself to other people and trying to be the superman or superwoman, and you just don't really give yourself any time to relax or slow down or be at peace. The natural genius, those are the people that are just naturally really good at everything. And the moment that you're not, that's when you feel really bad about yourself. So it's that I always get it on the first try. And if now you try something different and it's not coming to you easy, you can start to beat yourself up about that, and that imposter syndrome comes in. We talk about, have you ever heard of the inner critic? So these things go hand in hand. So it's like you've got your imposter syndrome, and your inner critic is in there just taking everything that the imposter syndrome is saying and just digging it even deeper. Like, everyone's gonna find out, or you're stupid, or you suck at this, and it's not true. It's all just noise in our heads. The soloist, this is the individual that taking independence to a whole new level. They think they have to carry everything, do everything. They refuse to ask for help because, again, they feel like the moment I ask for help, people are going to find me out. They're going to figure out that maybe I don't know what I'm doing, or maybe I'm not as good as, my friend over here, so I have to just do it all by myself. And the truth is that you don't, and you can miss out on a lot of opportunities by not asking for help. And then we have the expert. This is different than the natural genius. This is just the person that I'm going to just learn everything. I need to know how to do everything perfectly. I need to figure out everything just in case I might need it later. Like maybe you don't even need it right now, but there's something in your head telling you you've got to know everything. And so you're constantly just trying to learn it all, and that causes anxiety in itself. So then the next part of this are, what are some remedies? If any of those resonated with you, if any of those you can see yourself in that, what are some things that you can do? So with the perfectionist, it's thinking that perfection isn't human. Just remind yourself that we all make mistakes. None of us are perfect. Think that it's part of the process. You hear, I think Michael Jordan is the one that says, like, as great as he is, he had to fail a whole bunch of times to get there. So it's remembering nobody's perfect. And I like an example somebody I work with said, they're like, failure's okay, just fail forward. So as long as you're making progress and you're moving forward, it's okay. So keep that in mind. Thinking about the Superman or Superwoman, it's just really understanding that maybe focus on your own validation. Like you don't need somebody else to tell you did really good at that or you're really great. If we're constantly seeking the likes on our social media or things like that, it's just know internally that you're doing all right. The natural genius, reframe things. Just think about it. Like, I don't have to know everything on my first try. It's okay if there's something out there that I don't know. Maybe it's exciting to learn something new and not expect myself to have it perfect right out the gate. Soloist, find a buddy, find a friend, find somebody that you trust enough to lean on and that you can ask for help. And then the expert, start practicing just-in-time learning, and what that means is don't think, I need to know how to bake this 4-layer cake because I might need it for my friend's birthday party in 2 weeks. Just, if you need to learn how to make the cake, then learn, but don't feel like you have to learn everything because you want to get into a really good college one day, or you want to do this one day, or if you don't know everything, your future's at risk. That's not true. So it's just figuring out, what do you need to know in those moments? Some additional tips is remembering that I think pretty much, I don't know statistically, I don't have data on this, but my guess is that every person in this room has dealt with imposter syndrome at one point or another in their lives. So just knowing that you're not alone in that, we all feel it. Talk about it with friends that you trust. Maybe if it's not friends, maybe it's family members, maybe there's a therapist or social workers. Just talk to somebody that you trust about what you're feeling. Spend less time on social media. I said I have the 4 teenagers. They would laugh out loud if they heard me say that in this setting because there's no way, but truly focus on in-person friendships and relationships. How can you connect with people like in real time instead of on social media? Think about your strengths and your accomplishments. A lot of times we focus so much on our weaknesses and what we're not good at. So really think about, what are the things that I'm good at? And whether I'm good at it on the first try or I learn it, whatever that is, but just focus more on that. And then, I don't know if teenagers do this, I'm not sure if mine do, but journaling, like really just write down the little wins, the little things that you're doing well. Just keep a journal and then plan ahead and set goals. That'll help when you're trying to do everything at one time. And so that was the quick and fast version. Are there any questions about it or any discussions?
I'll ask a question. Mm-hmm. So I'm assuming that with these 5 different segmentations of imposter syndrome, they're not mutually exclusive.
Correct.
Because the descriptions I'm hearing can almost say, hey, I can identify, A and C coming together, which obviously are going to probably make it even worse.
Yes, and that is a really great point that you bring up, is that it's not just, oh, I deal with just this, or I'm the perfectionist and that's my title. They do, and maybe one day you're feeling what a perfectionist feels, and then the next day the genius and the soloist or the super, they all just intermix. So yeah. And then what do you do when you're getting hit with all of them at the same time? It's just really trying to figure out, just slowing yourself down, I think, is the answer. And really, when I think about the piece where the inner critic comes into play, there's this book called Taming Your Inner Gremlin. So that inner critic can be, show up in different ways, but it's just noticing what's happening to me right now. Am I getting hot? Am I sweating? Does my stomach knot up? And really just pay attention to it and start to realize when those things are occurring throughout the day, and it'll start to help you get a handle on it.
I'm also going to make an assumption that these things sort of wax and wane, that you may be chugging along and then you're put into a specific set of circumstances that result in the manifestation of one of these or more.
Yeah, I can say I know for me personally, because it'll get me sometimes, and it is, I think it is, depending on the situation, depending on, for example, if I'm presenting on something, did I prepare enough? Do I know what I'm talking about? Am I comfortable? And if I'm not, I'm going to think, everyone's going to find out. I shouldn't be up here. I have no idea what I'm talking about. It does, exactly.
Thank you.
I just thank you so much for this topic. I think it connects very well with the topic of the day as well, Black youth suicide and mental illness in the Black youth or other minorities. Because, our youth, especially Black youth and other minorities, these youth come in already with the challenge of facing implicit bias. Whether it is in the institution that they are going to or culturally, what they grow up hearing, from their parents, from their community. And that's a huge load that they have to carry when, on the other hand, they also want to go in an institution like a school wanting to succeed. Okay, so even if, they may have all the brilliance, but that load of how am I going to challenge that implicit bias that is not just among people of other cultures and races, but in my own, and among my own. And I think this is such an important topic when we try to understand the challenges of mental illness that our kids are facing. Because I'm not confident in the work I'm putting in because can I? Do I even have the potential to? Because, and what if I do? Am I copying somebody? Am I following a stereotype? And it's a huge burden on our children, especially with everything that the media is putting there. And you brought a good point about social media as well. I think we're becoming very fixated. Our society is becoming fixated on these stereotypes. So it's like, who am I and who am I supposed to be for other people? So I appreciate that.
No, thank you. You just made me think about when I've spoken with even just some of my Black women colleagues that will talk about that they were brought up, taught, like, you have to work harder. You have to do this hard. So it's natural, like, of course I'm going to be the perfectionist. Of course I'm going to be the soloist. Of course I'm going to, because that's what I have to do that to set myself apart because of the bias, because of those things that we're facing. And so, yes. And it just also, when I was doing research for this, just to dig a little deeper as it related to Black youth, is that the stereotyping is a huge piece. And then also the piece about not having role models that look like you. So you're in environments where you feel that you have to work even harder to outrun the stereotypes that might be following you. And also, I've had talks with people where they feel like they have to represent maybe their race or their gender. So I can't fail because then I'm going to make everybody who looks like me look bad. And it's a lot of pressure. Any questions over there? You're welcome. Oh, yes, sir.
Okay. So to meet with someone that identifies, let's say 3 out of the 5, right? So how do you discuss that with them? Do you take 1, 2, and 3 and prioritize them, or you just take? How do you do that? and they got 3, and they said, well, I want to work on these 3. So, you know, which one might be more important than the other?
Well, I think it's who you're talking to, like if the individual. Like maybe it's, you know, which one of these are keeping you up at night? Which one of these do you see shows up more in your, and I imagine as you're working through them, some of the same answers for one is going to be what is the answer for 2 or the 3. So there might not even be a need to separate them because they're probably so closely connected. But yeah, I'd start with just asking them.
And I think also further along in the dialogue, you'll begin to get a general idea of where that person is. Even if the individuals are synonymously suffering with all 3, eventually that person will have a direct point of what it is that they're suffering with. And you'll kind of be able to extract or be able to define that specific one thing.
So you talk about some individual things that people could do to kind of work through imposter syndrome. And I work in a school, so I'm often thinking through like a big picture lens, like a systematic lens. What are some ways that we as a community can support our children so that they're not feeling the implicit bias or the weight of imposter syndrome?
I mean, I think it's stuff that you're already trying to do. I mean, I think it's having these conversations. I think it's talking with, like, maybe, I don't know if it's a peer thing, you bringing kids and labeling it, like, you know, this is what it is. What you're feeling is normal. Like, 10 of us out of the 11 of us are feeling the same thing. And just providing safe spaces where they can talk about it. That's what I think would be helpful. And I don't know if anyone else has thoughts on that, what you would like to add to that you think might help?
I think that is good. I think the conversation needs to be not only within groups like this, but in the workplace, in school. I was just talking to somebody and I was letting her know, like, it doesn't matter what your history was, what your story is. You're in the same spot as people that you thought that you wouldn't even be in that circle with. So starting at school level, so when they get to a certain age, they're able to, like, pat their own self on the back and say that I did that. Because a lot of people do, even if you do it unconsciously, you compare yourself to other people, and you have it self-doubt. So just letting them know, like, you're in the same spot. You made it. What else more do you need?
I love that you said that so much, the patting yourself on the back, because so often we don't. I mean, even as adults, we don't. Like, self-promotion is a dirty word in the workplace sometimes, because you feel, again, goes to how you were raised. You know, were you raised to be humble or to not brag or to not do this or be quiet, and so it's really hard to say. And I also love the point you made. It doesn't matter, you know, where you came from. Like, I shared recently on my LinkedIn that I'm biracial. I was raised by my white single mother in Vancouver, Washington, on welfare. And, you know, I should have been a statistic, because there were all those stats going on around about how kids who are raised by single parents end up, and I turned out okay. So it's just reminding people that it doesn't define you.
It's a big conversation, because even for my husband, he had like a troubled childhood. He went to a private college and university, and he would look at his peers and be like, how am I here? And even now, like, you're made it. You had, you know, you're out of college, you have your master's, you know, you're working, you're doing this, what you went to school for, but it's still like, how am I next to people whose parents put them in private high school? Because you are.
But that's what this is. That's this imposter syndrome saying, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, that was
No, you certainly added some insight for me personally. A good friend of mine, it was actually about this time last year, and he was, I'm 62, and he was probably just a little bit younger, and he was a stand-up stellar guy. I mean, he was two-time Trooper of the Year. He was in the best shape that you could think of. I mean, it was the type of shape that you could probably go back to the Michigan State Police Academy the following day. He was a chaplain. He was a reverend. Martial artist. He was just a stand-up guy, and he completed the act of suicide. And he still worked for the state police as a civilian, and you would think on the outside that everything was perfect. I mean, like I said, he was a shining example of you know, what we should be, or shall I say what we thought we should be. And when you explain the different types of imposter syndrome, I can sort of, you know, attach one or two of those to him.
Yeah. It's, thank you for sharing that. I'll share, I lost one of my former soldiers to suicide about 4 days before Christmas this year. And when you're on the outside looking in, it's really hard to look at, you know, the why, what got them there. And I think the more this work that you all are doing is so important, because the idea is to, you know, hopefully bring those numbers down.
I also think it's like very important to like explain, especially when we're talking to younger people, our youth, to understanding that balance, because it's pros and cons to it, all about, right? Because most of it we use because it's motivation. Like, I want to be perfect in everything. Yes, I know you cannot be perfect in everything, but I feel like that motivated me to be on the top of my game in school, to be on the top of my game at work. So it's a balance, and helping them understand that balance and know that it's that self-worth, right? A lot of it starts with just that self-esteem and how they look at themselves.
Yeah. And the balance is key, because we want to work hard, we want to succeed, we want to break glass ceilings, we want to do all of those things, but it's really figuring out. And I think that's why it's important, the peer network and the friendships and the just other people that you can talk to that are doing the same things that you're doing.
Do you think that role models or idols have an impact on kids, because they get so much publicity, and some of these athletes and performers, they're making millions and millions of dollars every year, and these kids, they look up to them so much, but their lifestyle is far from what I would desire to have. But if they can't attain that level of success, does that have an impact as far as their self-worth or how they actually feel about themselves?
I mean, if I speak from just being a parent and seeing my kids, I would say yes, because you start to glamorize about, you know, what somebody else has, that comparison thing, whether you're comparing yourself to a famous athlete or a TikToker or your friend, you're still comparing yourself, and you're still looking at what somebody else has, and you're wanting that, and then you judging yourself by that, and if you're not going to live up to it, you're feeling bad about yourself. So I think while role models are important, it's also, again, I think having role models that you can actually have conversations with and not necessarily just kind of idolize is probably better for you.
I mean, some people, an ideal role model to me is someone that identifies with the common values of life, how you interact with your community, with your neighbors, with your friends.
Yeah.
One of my role models happens to be a minister, you know, because he's not rich by any means, and he never aspired to be, but he's grounded, and if I needed to talk to anybody, he's the guy I talk to.
Yeah.
You know, some of these superstars, they're so artificial, they're so, you know.
And that's the danger, too, of social media, because think about it. Most of us, or most of those people that are trending, or I said it right. They're presenting something. We don't know what's really going on. So you're comparing yourself to something that might not even be real. I even think about a former soldier of mine reached out and said, "Oh, you must be doing great because I don't see anything on Facebook saying otherwise." I'm like, well, I'm not gonna put, you know, my drama on social, but most people don't know. They see this life and they see these things and they're like, oh, they have it so perfect and I need that, and we don't know what's really going on.
I mean, if I had a child, I'd rather he wanted to be more like, say, Ben Carson than LeBron James. Or how many kids today think, oh, wow, you know, there's an officer in my community, I would really like to be like him someday.
Yeah.
You know, I think we need to kind of tone down those expectations and look at what's really important in a day-to-day life.
Yeah, and I think more chances we get to expose kids to their local role models, the more we may see that shift. Yes, ma'am.
I was going to bring this to the kids' side of it. There is a lot of very negative role models going on online for young people, and so for girls in particular in high school. There's a new study that just came out. 70% of our high school girls want to be influencers. That's what they're looking at, is watching people online who have cool clothes and they get to do cool stuff, making their TikToks and stuff, and that's what they want to be. Think about that kind of pressure for young girls. I mean, this is just.
But if I may, the gentleman brought up a very good point, and I want to underscore the word that he said in his statement. He mentioned success. And I think we have to get back specifically in the context to our young people of how success is defined and seen. So success nowadays is seen in terms of objects, what you have, what you drive, what you wear. So we have to get back to that point where we're looking at people in context of subjects. What does these individuals bring as opposed to something tangible? So in our community, and we have to be honest, for many of our people that are African Americans here, most of us, listening to my dear friend's presentation, all of us, I believe, suffer from all of those because of the systemic systems and what we oftentimes have to put ourselves up against to be that imposter. So it's difficult to come into a room when you're sitting here and you're the only person of color in that room. So what are your counterparts thinking? Your counterparts, some of them, not all, are thinking that you don't belong here. So you begin to question your cognitive ability. Do I really belong here? So we have to get back to understanding what success is and being able to have these uncomfortable dialogues where we both learn and grow and understand those cultural differences.
I love that, and I want to add, like, it really starts, I know we say a lot, like, it starts at home, but it really does, right? It can be from a dad taking the daughter out to ice cream because he got an A, but not the son because he got a C. But did the son work just as hard, right? Like, especially sometimes, a lot of times in our culture, when it comes to learning disabilities and things like that, we don't seek out the support. And it's just, you're not trying, you're being bad, right? So, of course, me as the boy that's struggling in math, no, even if I was under my cover with a flashlight trying to learn it, but I still got to see. But when I see my parents praising my sister, yes, I'm going to get that, right? Where I have to be perfect, I have to do this, I have to be better, right? So it starts with that balance and that foundation. And I love when you say, what is success? Success for everybody is totally different. For me and my household, it might be Ben Carson, no. LeBron James, so it's for everybody. Success can just be, in some household, he made it through high school, right? So it's what is success? So I'm just loving this.
I like what he said about the uncomfortable conversations, because I had not one, two family members die by suicide in 2023. One of them, she was very successful. She had just graduated nursing school. She had bought her own property. She was in a very healthy relationship. However, she was severely depressed. And she would tell everybody that would listen, but nobody around understood depression. And we all in our community, there is a stigma against mental illness. That's the uncomfortable conversation we all need to have. That's what we need to be blaring out. How mental illness isn't it isn't a shameful thing. Most of the time it's a chemical thing. It's a makeup type of thing. So when you said that uncomfortable conversation, that stung, because that's all I do is talk about it now.
I'll come back to you, sir, but I want to share something that I'm embarrassed to share. But when my 15-year-old, this was last year, so she would have been 14, and she kept coming to me, talking about she felt depressed and she was feeling low, and I said to her, and why are you depressed? You have such a great life, and we have all, and fast forward to this year, and she's in therapy, and we had gotten meds, and we're doing all this stuff, and she's like, remember that when you said that to me? And I was like, yes, I do, and it wasn't my finest moment, but I'm glad that, she forgave me, and we were able to have the conversation, and she recognizes that that was my human error, but it was just such a good reminder that sometimes that was me not taking it serious, and that could have gone a totally different direction. And too often, I think other people make that same
I
mistake.
wouldn't say not taking it serious, but not understanding.
Or not, yeah.
Not seeing it for what it is, or because we weren't raised to seek help.
Yeah.
We just don't see it. We think, oh, you're just sad, you'll get over it. Not understanding, like everybody don't have family members in behavioral health. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Everybody, you know, it's still a huge stigma.
Yeah.
When I tell people I see a therapist, they're like, "You take medicine?" You know, that's the first thing they say, like, you like crazy? Like, so yeah, that's the hard conversations, I think, is the foundation we need to start with, in my opinion.
Well, and it is good that more and more, I was on a call this morning when they were talking about trends in the workplace, and that one of the, I think the number one thing right now is well-being. Those conversations about well-being and about mental health, and the employees expect their employers to be facilitating this and to be making sure that these things are happening in the workplace. So that gives me hope that we're having more and more. It's becoming more and more okay to talk about. And you wanted to say something too.
Help me bridge the gap between yesteryear and today when we talk about imposter syndrome. And I thank God for my wife, I really do, because she has really provided a lot of humanity in terms of my life and how I deal with our children. I'm old school, and my parents dealt with me in a different manner. And obviously those things don't work today. But when I think about what you said, Pastor, in terms of imposter syndrome and having to live up to something, and then I go back in time and I think about a Jesse Owens, you know, who spit in the face of Hitler and then had to come back to America and run against horses. And then when I think about a Simone Biles, another Olympic champion who had the courage to be able to say, hey, I have to sit down right now because I have something going on. Help me understand what's the difference. Why, when you take two individuals, of extreme success in that particular area or any particular area, but then back in the day when imposter syndrome was that was the hallmark. I mean, that's how we succeeded. We succeeded by being twice as better and being this and being that and all of that type of thing. And those numbers, as you have shared, they didn't reflect a suicide rate that we have today. Yeah, and I struggle with that in terms of understanding, and like saying, thank God for my wife, because my style of discipline, according to how my dad, my mom disciplined me, would not work today. I mean, I'm actually sort of, I'm actually at the point where, fortunately, they're young adults, but it's sort of kind of gingerly dealing with them because, another personal story. A good friend of mine, Sergeant. This kid was honor student, athlete, all of that good stuff. He was a football coach. His kids got into an argument, brother and daughter, and dad came in and disciplined his son, and he went upstairs and he hung himself. I mean, not disciplined in terms of taking the belt to him, but go to your room. You don't do that to your sister. And sometimes, I walk around on eggshells around my kids because, I don't want to push them over the edge.
Yeah. I think it's a profound question. I don't know if, and I mean, the panel could help me out with this. So I had a brother who committed suicide 7 years ago. Jumped off the Detroit Bridge into the Detroit River. We found his body 5 days after the incident. It was one of the most traumatizing situations for our family. I could remember asking my dad, did we have any mental health challenges within the context of our family? And I remember his conversation. He was livid. He said, of course we don't. So we never really determined exactly what led up to his suicide. So your question, what is the difference between an Owens and Simone Biles? Me personally, pastoring, business owner, etc. I think what we see in this era, as opposed to what we seen back then, the Martins, Malcolm, those guys, is that technology has pushed us over the edge. So it's literally, you can sit down and you can sit down on Instagram, whatever outlet you so choose, and you could see something that challenged you internally. So I see it every day on the mental health unit, whether it's a veteran or whether I'm dealing with somebody from the context that comes and sit downs in my office. There is a plethora of things that are just at us, and not just our young people, it's our adults as well. So when you have that broad information that's pouring into you, so look at it. If I'm sitting down at the dining room table, I'm texting my son and he's sitting right there across from me. The personal intimacy is gone. So all we do, you have a generation that's just growing up with Apple. That's all they know is Apple computers. So when you have that in this generation, unfortunately, we have to be honest. We don't oftentimes know what our children are reading, what they're watching, and it's a number of things that are just at them. You have society, you have those internal conflicts, you have all of that going on. So it's easy for them to check out, so to speak, as opposed to sitting down with you and saying, Dad, I'm suffering with depression, or I have schizophrenia, I believe I might have a bipolar disorder. They're not gonna have that conversation with you. My dear friend talked about having those safe places. One of the things that I do on my unit is when I'm talking to my veterans, the first thing that I tell them is that judgment stops right here. There is no judgment here. I see through you as a person. And I think what happens with many of us is that when our children or members in our family tend to tell us these things, some of us look at them like, what the hell is wrong with you? You know, it's not having that respect to realize that, look, there may be something here. And I think as we begin to acknowledge that and take away the shame, get over the guilt and the shame. The reality is that someone told me that my brother's behavior prior to his incident was not becoming of who he was. So could there have been some signs that we missed, or some signs that we knew were there, but we just chose not to acknowledge? So we have to get back to that point where we're intimate with each other at the dining room table, taking the time out in forums like this for us to really engage. Most of us at home with our own children, we don't even know our children. So we have to get back to that intimacy of really understanding them and understanding it from the context of the pressure that they deal with daily. It is no way that I would think that I could go into a school and a young lady would tell me, you know, Pastor, you don't know how many times I go in the bathroom and people are trying to recruit me. So they're trying to recruit them to come over to this side. I didn't have to deal with that when I was in high school. So this is a whole different foundation, and it's a foundation that we need to get caught up with, or we're gonna be left behind.
Can I add something to that, and then I think too, and you all can tell me who are parents, if this is just me, I think sometimes we have to be careful with when our children do come to us and say that they're suffering or they're dealing with things, not to take it that like it's an affront to us, or we've done something wrong, or I can't acknowledge that that's going on because then that would say something about me as a parent. And if we just set ourselves aside and focus on what our children are going through, then we can better help them and better serve them. And then, sir, I want to just, because you went and then you.
Yeah, I was just thinking about what you were saying about with your daughter and working with parents. It's kind of like a norm for us, because we look at it ourselves. You telling me that you depressed, and I done did all this work to get to where we is. I done provided everything for you, and you telling me that something is wrong? No, now we taking it personally. But to answer what he was saying about, it's the work ethic. This generation has no work ethic because everything is supposed to just come to them. So it's some of the things that I do is live stream, right? So you see all these TikTokers and everything, and they get their 5 minutes of fame. So you see a child that sees that and they say, I want that same thing. And they say, well, look, all they got is their phone and a microphone, and they just go live and it just happens. So they living with that same thought, not knowing that there's a work ethic behind, that there's 24-hour days of planning and preparation and actually money that's being put into becoming that live stream. Because, why? Because with the music and everything else, everything is like right here, it's right now. So they have no work ethic to say, well, I'm gonna plan for my future for me to be this great person. They like, no, I just need that phone and that microphone right now. Some of us as parents, you know, it is that we don't teach them. We don't teach them that because why? When I grew up as a kid, my parents are, I want this and I want that. And they say, you know what? You figure out a way to get half of it. And then I'll give you the rest. So that put me in a perspective. I got to figure out how to do this. So I cut grass. I shovel snow. A lot of parents, I'm not going to put my kid through that because my mama traumatized me, making me go out and work. So they work 60, 70 hours a week, and they buying the Jordans, and they buying the iPhones for the kid, but the kid not learning. They're not learning. All they saying is, well, and then you wonder why when they 25 and they ain't left your house and they still sitting there with no job. Right. Well, let's think about what we're doing. So.
Yes.
So I just want to add a little bit about, you know, the importance of communication with the kids. I think one of the things that technology has done, I mean, there are a lot of benefits to it. Of course. But what it has done is it's taken away that art of communication that human beings can. I mean, the difference between me and a gorilla is the ability to communicate. Everything else the gorilla mom is doing, you know, except using words, right? And the way we process our emotions and put them where they belong in our brain is words, vocabulary. You know, we don't know basic vocabulary of feelings. You know, it's either good, bad, or a shrug of a shoulder. You know, and that vocabulary, I mean, research has shown that in children who are reared from infancy on in an environment where communication is happening, by 30 months, they have developed feeling vocabulary, okay? I'm not even talking about 5 years here. I'm talking about, you know, 3-4-year-olds who come and tell you how frustrated they are. I mean, they may say polosteritis, but they will say it. You know, she did in preschool, it was hilarious. But you know, that is, I think, one of the problems that's happening with technology, because our kids are so used to saying IDK bro that it's too much pain and a chore to say I don't know. Because it's like, and you should automatically understand that. And our brain, I mean, there's a reason why our brain is different from the gorilla mom. It's taken millions of years to develop that way. And that is that, you know, that benefit of having that refinement of communication language that we don't have. And when we don't process our emotions, what happens? We are seeking instant gratification. And then when we are upset, death is what we go for. I'd rather kill myself than lose my iPhone. I mean, how many kids end up in the ER because their parents decide to turn off the Wi-Fi at 11 o'clock at night? And that is a shame, because it's become, in fact, DSM-5 had suggested having internet gaming addiction and internet and gaming addiction as a category to be considered for the next edition. Right? So I just wanted to bring that point that I don't think we're communicating with our children enough.
Well, you make me think of a good point. We use this model, and then I'm going to go to the officer and then to you, but where we talk about communication, and it's a pie chart, and it really is showing, and I cannot remember the source, but it's saying 7% of how our messages are received are through our words, 55% are our body language, and 38% is tone of voice. You don't get body language or tone of voice when you're Snapchatting or you're texting and so I know with my kids, they'll read a message and it'll be like, why did you do that? And I'm like, it could just say, why'd you do that? Like you're making things, it's a whole thing. But yes, sir.
To add to a couple of things that everybody, gentlemen said, what's different, right? We think back to when we were kids and we went to high school. Please don't age me with this. But there was bullying then. There was, clearly. And this is just an aspect of it, right? But I remember, you fought when you got off the bus, at the bus stop, you fought, right? And then you went home, right? It was over. You had 12 hours of rest, of comfort in your home, of downtime. You could rejuvenate, you could clear your mind, you could do whatever, right? And then you had to worry, like, tomorrow morning when I get back, we're gonna be right at the bus stop, fighting again, get bullied, whatever, right? On the weekends, you didn't have to worry about it. You had 2 or 3 days. These kids today, it's relentless. 3 o'clock in the morning. We're going to situations at 2, 3, 4, 5 in the morning on a school night where somebody's threatening someone, they're on their phones, they're attached. It's endless for them. And I mean, I'm a parent. I have my last is a teenager now. But what I'm saying is it's relentless. They're always attached to these things. I went on a cruise for 7 days. I put it in the room. I was jittery.
Yeah.
I was jittery. I was like, I gotta.
We were talking about that before. It's like even
As a juvenile dealing with all of this stuff, and I mean, it's almost unbearable for them. And then that's what we see. We see that in the runs that we go to, and the reports that we go to. Why? It's just never ending. And it's not only the kids they see or they know. It's some kid in Hawaii, or Asia, or whatever country, wherever. It's constant. They post something, and then there's 75 or 80 different bullies hitting them, and getting pretty nasty. So, I mean, that's a aspect of it, but it's terrible for you.
Real quick, is there a correlation between parents relinquishing their responsibilities? Too many parents now want to be a friend rather than a parent.
Absolutely. Listen.
I think I need to rely on
the
the
expertise. Arrow to my heart, because I'm that parent. And just recently, I had to just realize I'm doing more harm than good. When my son set an iPhone 14 down and walked away because he knew I wouldn't be angry, because we cool like that. We talk like that. I was like, yeah, sis, you gotta regroup. You doing something.
we have thoughts and thoughts.
Just quickly, just on the communication track that we was on. I think it's like very important. I am so glad that we're here. I think it's very important to start having panels with just parents, because we all just look at ourselves, and I'm not a parent, but I'm an auntie to 4, so my brother stop. But even when I'm talking to him and he's like, okay, me and my husband and I, we're both therapists, so my brother talk to them. But when I listen to how my brother talked to my nephew, who is struggling in school, and I tell him, the way that you're communicating, a lot of parents sometimes, I'm the parent, you the child, you're gonna listen to me. If we can do simple steps, it is so simple. Open and close ended questions get you a long way. You good? Of course the kid gonna say yes, and you close the door, mom, go and do whatever you wanna do. How was your day? Open that door for that kid to be able to come and talk to you. We have to start taking accountability. It's not all the kids. Of course they're gonna run to social media and their friends and be influenced, and we're closing them out. Being able to let them know, I'm actively listening to you. Being able to reflect what they're seeing is super important. So helping my brother with those steps, my nephew and my brother's relationship has grown because he's not saying, you good, or what you do today. He's opening that door to have an open conversation with him, and it's making it better for his relationship. This needs to be with parents, not,
I can tell you as a parent, and then I'll go to you, and then I probably should sit down. But as a parent, when I tried to with my girls, to do because I said so, and I'm the parent, it's a lot more difficult. When we just have a conversation, why are you feeling how you're feeling, and I find that they actually want to talk to me. I'm sure they don't tell me everything. I'm not that naive, but they want to come to me.
Opening the door. This is the last thing I'm gonna say. I think since the pandemic, I want to give the little people a round of applause, even though they're not all in here. But I think that mental health has been a big thing for them. I don't know if it's a trend, but I have a 9-year-old client that tell his little cousin, leave me alone, I'm about to talk to my therapist. So now it's cool for them to have a therapist. I think that social media has helped them talk about it more. I got a therapist. it's a cool thing for them, which, okay, let it be cool because it's gonna help you in the end.
So I absolutely appreciate this conversation. It's been fantastic, but I want to make sure we get an opportunity to go to.
Yeah. So I was going to ask, I feel like I've engaged everyone. I mean, I can stand and present what I do have, but if you guys feel comfortable, I mean, how would you guys want to do it? I'm good either way.
Yeah, so we can open it up.
We want to hear what you got to say.
Okay.
Stand it up.
So for me as well, this has been very fruitful. As mentioned, when the situation took place in regards to my brother, not only was it traumatizing, but I decided to go ahead and begin to get therapy for myself. One of the things that I found that in retrospect to African Americans, because I either counsel or I either see them on a daily basis, geographically, because of where I work in the city, the majority of the John D. Vingo VA Center is pretty much people of color. So you begin to see and recognize some of the things that are very pertinent to their stories and some of the things that they don't share in the context in regards to some of the medical or the other individuals within that team. And so I was thinking about it from something that the National Library of Medicine suggests, and they suggest, and I'm using the acronym PWMI, which is pretty much people with mental health illness. And they suggest that there is this stigma that manifests through three main mechanisms. I want to hover on that for a minute. And it's the mechanism of experience, anticipated, and internalized. So what does that mean? That simply means that what they've experienced in the past, they begin to internalize that. So when they're a part of the IDT team, how am I going to be viewed? How are my thoughts, my depression, my emotions, how is that going to be heard in the context of my counterparts? Or will it be heard? And if it is heard, how is it going to be diagnosed? There's oftentimes the case of misdiagnosed in regards to people of color. And it's amazing because when I spoke to my dad about it, there was this attitude of not even suggesting that there could have been something wrong. I'm gonna suggest a book to you all. It's a book called Medical Apartheid. It is a very profound book in regards to why people of color do not trust the medical system. I would suggest that you read it. It is a very profound and graphic book. So hover with me if you can as we talk about the experience and the stigma, which refers to both past and present encounters with individuals who have those or may be diagnosed with something. So the stigma part of it comes into play as what has already been said here in this room. How do we provide those safe places for those individuals who are struggling with those issues, who may not necessarily want to share their story and or their experience? One of the things that I often do is when I go on the floor each morning on the mental health, on the psych ward, there's always this paranoia, if you will, or either this reluctance to engage. Because in a person of color eyes, how am I going to be perceived this time? And notice what I said, this time. How am I going to perceive, and what is that going to look like in the context of the team that's going to be working with me? So when we look at this stigma piece, I think first and foremost what comes into play with me, and I think we're doing that in this room, is that we have to shift the narrative a little bit. Shift the narrative and be more open and honest about those things in regards to people of color. And I think it goes without saying that as we have these difficult conversations, we cannot negate the fact that there has been systemic studies that show that there is certain things that has not been always good as it relates to people of color. And that's where that honest conversation comes in. And guess what, people? It's going to be a difficult conversation. But if it is a conversation that is to be had, if we're going to grow and develop, it has to be a conversation that has to be had in the context of those that don't necessarily look like us, or in the context of those that don't necessarily even live in our communities. So I thought about it from being open and honest enough to admit, first of all, that there are hurdles, and they are existing. You guys have to forgive me. I just got these braces, and Lord have mercy, these things are challenging, man. Yeah, so you have to realize that that does exist. And one of the things that I oftentimes have appreciated, and I know you guys would as well, is that from a young people perspective, have you guys noticed that there's a lot of people that are coming out about their mental health illnesses? So you look at Kerry Washington, for instance, you had the Obama administration, Gabrielle Union just recently did something, and they're talking about the importance of counseling. For many people of color, oh no, we don't do counseling. No, we need counseling. We need counseling. And I think that counseling will give us a good clarity of what it is that we struggle with. There's a book, I do a lot of marital counseling, and there's a book called Lies We Tell at the Altar. And it's a powerful read, and it talks about how most of the things that we deal with in the context of our marriage has to do with unresolved issues in our childhood. Now let's equate that to mental health. So when I'm dealing with my patients, I'll give you this scenario. An individual who was struggling with his identity, he's a bisexual individual. And when I walked on the floor the other day, the first thing that he asked me, was I upset with him because he was a gay male? Wasn't expecting that. Now I get pretty much a lot of it around the clock, but I wasn't expecting that. And right then in that moment, he was facing a crisis. I already knew what his diagnosis was, schizophrenia, paranoia, I already knew that. So what is he acting out of? Or what is his emotions at that time? At that given moment, the only thing that was important to me was engaging that feeling. That was important to him. So as it wasn't a question of why do you feel like that? That was important to him. So when we are able to see the person, and I always have to remind the staff of this. I was just sharing this with my team this evening. When we're looking at some of our chart notes, especially from the psychiatrist, the social worker, you're not going to get certain things from your side as opposed to my side, because they totally see me as a safe place, but as a safe space. But why? The question that we need to ask is that we have the ability for each of us to be considered as that safe place. And I think as that camaraderie, as that rapport is built up, but in certain instances, you don't necessarily have that time to spend with most of your patients. So I have to remind the staff that when you're dealing with someone with a cognitive disorder, understand the behavior, the cognitive disorders, that there's a person in there somewhere. And if you can get past that, if you can get past the behavior, if you can get past the outbursts, if you can get past the person lying on the floor and see the person, then you can begin to unravel their story. And most of them will tell you, believe you me, most of them will tell you, I'm this way because of what transpired in my past. I feel this way because of what I did not get at home, or what I seen in combat, or it could be an issue of what's known now as moral injury. So I think when we talk about the representation is important as it relates to the media and some of the things that has already been expressed here. But what about the cultural competence? And I think that's an important piece. We have to be comfortable enough to engage the differences in the context of our cultures. Not to be fearful of it, but to embrace it. I think the officer just said it well, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and you're running to these type of cases. We have to be honest enough to say that, look, people that look different from me still suffer the same way. And it doesn't make a difference in regards to my exterior appearance. It has everything to do with what makes up chemical and how do we treat that. So when my brother committed suicide, and finally we were able to sit down with my family, my mom, my dad, and talk about it, it was a very uncomfortable conversation. but it was a conversation that needed to be had. And I think for many of our children of color, if we learn how to embrace and accept the depression, the emotions, the outbursts, and learn how to nurture them through it, I think the journey to wholeness would be a lot better.
I want to just slide this in ACEs training. I don't know if you need your ACEs training. They say it's not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you.
Of course.
That's what we need to focus on.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hopeful because I see a lot. I see it changing. I live in the city of Detroit, and I encounter, because I'm a speeder, you know, I'm a driver.
So you're confessing. You're confessing.
I get pulled over a lot. But I get pulled over a lot because, like, I live not too far from the high crime area, and they're open. And even on bad days, they come to the car like, you again. You know what I'm saying? Or they, if I'm not familiar with them, they're real open. They don't automatically say, "What's wrong with you?" And like, "How's the day going? You know, what happened today?"
Mm-hmm.
You know. And so I'm hopeful because maybe it's the training that you're getting, or that is being had inside of the institutions. We need to bring it outside the institution, like Mrs. Blanford said, and we need to talk amongst ourselves. Because a lot of people still think, even in different communities, not just in the African American community, talking about mental illness is just an uncomfortable conversation that
Yes.
a lot of us don't want to have.
Mm-hmm.
If we start having it at work with our friends or amongst our peers, it'll be much easier to have it with our children.
Yeah. Excellent. Yes. Yes. Any other comments, concerns, observation? Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
So I'm one of the people, anything cars, I'm there.
Mm-hmm.
And this year, past year, Pontiac Roadkills night, I was there, and this gentleman came, and I'm like, just prejudging. I seen the camo hunter outfit on, you know, he had the drink in his hand, just cursing like crazy. And I had my granddaughter, so I just looked at him like, man, you know. And he said, "Oh, sir, I'm sorry. And, you know, so he and I just kind of engaged the conversation. And I was like, well, what's going on with you? And he was like, I said, you know, it looked like something's bothering me. He said, well, why do you ask that? I said, well, I keep him with me. I was like, I'm a therapist. So I gave him a card, and he was like, man, okay, he said, man, you just have no idea. I just broke up with my girlfriend, and my best friend took me out, and I've been drinking like crazy all day. So long story short, I'm talking to the guy. He said, my dad, you know, he doesn't engage in conversation with me, so it's just me by myself. In the middle of Pontiac, this guy's hugging me, crying in my arms. You know, and so that's like, we need to get back to that just community type thing.
Yeah. Yes, Doc.
No, I just want to add something, maybe sort of like a summing up thing, that, you know, we are social animals, born social animals.
Of course.
And, you know, the need to be accepted is a need and not a want. You know, and that is a need from the time that a woman becomes pregnant. It's not even when she pops out the baby, you know. And what it really boils down to is then, is our new generation able to accept themselves for who they are? It doesn't matter color. I mean, in this day and age, with all, you know, where I can talk to somebody in China right now, we are thinking colors. We're thinking race, and we're thinking, you know, and I wonder why, because, you know, after I'm buried, I'll be a bunch of bones. You know? So what difference does it make? It's just make the world more colorful. So it's just about, you know, I think that what it really, when I'm working with kids or when I'm working with adults in therapy or otherwise, you know, one of the tasks that I always give them is, I want you to write 5 things you like about yourself and what you accept about yourself. Not what your mom likes about you, not what your dad likes about you, whatever. I said, And sometimes, kids laugh when I say that. I said, if you like the way you fart, put it on it. Right. But because that is something that's personal.
Yes.
And I have them write it on multiple index cards and keep it in important places. Because I think we're trying to impress everybody so much we forget ourselves.
Yeah.
And, bottom line is, how much am I accepting myself for who I am? People ask me about my hijab, people ask me about my, a lot of different things. Sometimes they come in with a bias. But, the way I answer it, because this is my choice and I'm proud of it, makes all the difference in that relationship. And I've had patients who criticize me for wearing it, but stayed in treatment and benefited from it. It's about my comfort with who I am as a person. And if I'm accepting myself, people will accept me. And I think that is the key to addressing that implicit bias. I can lose my breath talking about how other people should think about me. But the only way I think we can address is teaching our children to be proud of themselves, of who they are, and actually help them acknowledge what strengths they have, rather than dreaming of having an engineer son. I mean, my culture, either you're a lawyer, engineer, or doctor. Everybody else is trash. I mean, what are you supposed to do then? So, sorry about the ramble, but I just wanted to put it in.
No, I think it's timely, and I'm looking at our time here to the therapists in the back and to what you said, Doc. I could remember I was in a group training not too long ago, and I was dealing with substance abuse. And I remember a veteran, very profound individual who had done some phenomenal things for this country, but she was a victim of rape. And I remember exactly what she told me. She said, Chaplain, she said, I drink myself to death every night because all I want the military to do is just acknowledge that it happened. And it was so profound. She said, if they would just acknowledge that it happened, she said, I would be okay. And my rebuttal to her was, what if you never hear that? What if you never hear that? If you never hear that, do you still consider yourself to have value? So it goes back to what you just said. When I'm teaching my groups, I oftentimes tell my veterans, it's not what I see in you, it is what you see in yourself. And when we get back to that, I think in terms of mental health, whether it's with people of color or whatever, I think that would be the starting place for us to go, and it would be an awesome venture for us to travel together. Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right, before we get to our final wrap-up, could we just give our panelists a round of applause? They were phenomenal tonight. And we just have one quick safety update from our Chief of Police, and then we're going to go into our grounding exercise, and then we're going to close for the evening, all right? So Chief, if you'd like to come up.
I will try to be brief, which I am, it's very difficult for me to be, so I apologize about that. Amazing conversation. I want to thank everybody for what has been said, more importantly for what I've learned and what I've been able to take and use in my own life and with my family and my profession. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things we've experienced, some trends that are going on with the Farmington Hills Police Department, because that's what I will speak in knowledgeably about. I don't know what's going on in other cities. I mean, I do, but I don't know the level of that. So, so in Farmington Hills, I do believe we have the best possible approach training program to dealing with individuals that are dealing with mental health issues or suffering some kind of an episode, because people ask me, how many runs a year do you go on that have mental health? I can't give you an accurate number on it. I would probably say anywhere from 10 to 15% of what we do. We have about 55,000 runs a year, calls for service. And there's some aspect of mental health involved with that. And I would probably say that would be conservative at best. There's always an aspect of family trouble, a larceny, damage of property, something, or a road rage incident, anything. But we petition approximately 425 individuals per year. We petition an individual for evaluation at least once a day, at least, if not twice. We have a very aggressive program for it, policy, training, and I'll cover that in a little bit, but it's rooted in Michigan law back in 1970s. That gives us the responsibility of shall. We shall if we experience this individual or an individual. So, but the primary focus is life preservation. That's our primary focus, but that's not enough. It's not, it can't be, because you're gonna get that situation, that individual that's out of that emergency situation, and we shouldn't be at all these situations that are going on in families. We should not be. You know, there's all this debate over co-responders, and there's great aspects of that, but if a police officer shouldn't be there, a police officer shouldn't be there. We're not necessarily the best person, the best representative to do that. Sometimes we're not the highest skilled, sometimes we're not the highest trained, we're not the highest experienced. When it's a life-threatening situation, absolutely, we have to be there, absolutely. But outside of that, you know, you can make your argument one way or the other. But in Farmington Hills, once we take care of that primary life-saving measure, which, let's all be honest here, if somebody's life is in danger, there's peril, you only dial one number, and that's 911, and you're gonna get 2 officers, again, in Farmington Hills. But we take it farther than that, because it's not just about saving that individual's life or stopping somebody from doing something harmful to themselves or someone else. It's about the quality of life for not only that individual moving forward, but the family, because the family members are on that front line right with that individual who is armed or trying to harm themselves or talking about harming themselves or whatever. Those family members, and again, it's not always a family member with them, but a lot of times those family members are at those 2 o'clock in the morning calls, those 6 a.m. calls, not going to school. And that's something that we focus on. It's getting them the help that we can provide them. There's some resources we can get to them. It's not only that individual, but the family support. Somebody said it back there, training, it's about training. I think somebody who said that they don't violate motor vehicle law ever, the person that said they'd never do that, training is crucial. You're right, you're absolutely right. Couldn't say anything more about it than that. It's about equipping our officers that are going to be in those situations with what resources are available, not only for them, but for them to provide to the individual or the family member. Most importantly, we can't cause harm. We can't cause harm in the words we say. I'm not only talking about the physical harm, I'm talking about the psychological harm, the verbal harm that we can, you know, it's like on the fire side. You know, cops are always bad, I get it. But the fire side, when we go to a medical situation and a firefighter, an EMT shows up and somebody's suffering from a medical situation and somebody smarts off and says, "What, do you got the sugars?" You know, it's just completely disrespectful. You know what that person's gonna remember? That comment. They're gonna remember the officers and the firefighters standing around them. So we wanna do not only the physical, we wanna avoid any physical harm, but that psychological harm, because when we talk about that, when you dial that 911, that person probably won't dial 911 again next year, or they'll be that much hesitant. They might pause. So, I already said that I'm proud to say that our law enforcement agency is the best in the nation. I think that everyone should do that. We should work. We have got a lot of more work to do. But if you're not proud of your agency, you shouldn't be there, or you should be fixing it. You should be getting it fixed. There's 3 recognized levels of mental health training in the law enforcement world. First is, and these are not exact, but these are generalized. There's a mental health first aid. It's an 8-hour basic class. There's behavioral health response programs. They're anywhere from 16 to 28 hours, 32-hour programs. And then there's crisis intervention, which is a big one, 40 hours. And those are 3 different levels, and their experts will tell you not every cop should be trained in this, not every cop should be trained in that. But the leading national program that kind of gives executives or leaders their idea of what to do in law enforcement is the International Association of Chiefs of Police One Mind Initiative. And they have some basic frameworks with that. They do. It's a model policy, a partnership with a mental health organization, and then they focus on training. They want 100% of the officers, sworn officers, trained in mental health first aid, and then 20% of other staff, could be dispatchers, could be officers, could be anyone, trained in CIT. That's their, because training is expensive, you take resources away. So in 2020, when I became chief, I wanted to crush that IACP model. I wanted to make that, we had 100% of our officers and dispatchers trained in mental health first aid. Because the first 911 person you contact is not a police officer, it's a dispatcher. And that was crucial. That starts that process, that life safety, that lifeline, those resources, and it also stops us from going. You just want to talk to someone, you're depressed about your girlfriend leaving you or your boyfriend leaving you, you don't need a police officer. Hey, what about 888? What about all these other resources? What about talking to this? You might not have to have that police officer on the front porch at 2 o'clock in the morning pounding on your door trying to ask you if you're okay. So that was important. So we not only did officers 100%, but our dispatchers too. Then in my research with CIT, it was not suggested by any professionals that all of our officers be CIT trained. I was shocked at that. I'm like, that's kind of the pinnacle of training for officers. Why wouldn't we all want to be that? It's a different dynamic. You have to have the officers that are invested. They have to have a baseline. So, okay, then what is it? They recommend having a group or a certain group of your officers CIT trained, and then the bulk of your officers trained in some other behavioral health response program. Contacted our state representative, Samantha Steckloff, talked about some money that was available. I wanted to get a grant. I wanted all of our officers, all of our dispatchers trained in behavioral health response program. It's originated out of Wayne State. I brought that program here, not only our officers, but all of our dispatchers, all of us, 100% of us, no matter what, because your call for a mental health crisis at 8 a.m. on a Monday is going to get the same level of response that somebody that calls at 3 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday is going to get. It's got to be that continuous amount of care for our citizens. So we were able to do that. We got that in place in Farmington Hills. Now the state of Michigan, MCOs, the people who license law enforcement officers, have moved that program into our academies, and now every officer moving forward is going to have that training, and it's needed. And again, I'm proud of my agency. I'm proud of what my officers do. They have that training, the dispatchers. And we talked about why is training so crucial. You have a community, and I'm not talking about the Farmington Hills community, but individuals that are suffering through these crises, the family members, hesitant to call, hesitant to admit, hesitant to get help. You have that group that is hesitant to call 911 because of historical police incidents and et cetera. Now you talk about communities of color. They're even less hesitant to call us. We have to do better. We, the police department. And that's what we do. We want to give that level of response, that level of service when you call. The last thing you need to worry about is if the police are going to come here and mistreat your loved one, they're not going to handle them with care, with compassion. And so another aspect of that higher level of training is before the incident gets to critical or emergency situation. Our officers are now trained that when you and your daughters are having a fight and it's over the phone, our officers have that heightened situational awareness to come in and say, is there maybe mom, dad, whoever, is there something going on? Do you want to talk about maybe substance use disorder? Is there some substance use disorder going on? Are you finding some things? Because mom or dad, I see it in myself, in my own kids. I don't see it The stories that you guys were saying, I was sitting back there going, yep, last Thursday, she said it to me, and I did just what you guys said. Who A, B, or C did. I do it. I'm a trained professional, yeah, but I'm a dad and I'm a human being first of all. And you know what? I didn't see it. I don't see it. Did she mean what she said? When she said that, did she really mean that? Was she really threatening herself, or was she just joking? Was that some kind of a off the cuff joke? So I see it. So what we want to do as a police department, and we speak from that frame, that lens, we want to give our community the best possible level of service, the best possible level of comfort, calling us for help when they're dealing with such a sensitive, such a traumatic, such a deep situation like this, where the last thing they should be worrying about is who's showing up in uniform, if we're going to harm, if we're going to make the situation worse. We can't. We have to only make it better to the best of our ability. So if somebody wants to ask me a question about that, I just wanted to cover that. I can't go nearly as good as you guys did and talk about what, but I'll be over there. We'll be over there if you want to ask us. And I thank you for just the opportunity to participate and be part of this. So anybody with any questions, please let me know. Yep. No, you're speeder. I'm going to be looking for you outside.
I want to commend you for putting your neck out there like that. For coming in as a chief. Obviously, you just knew to becoming a chief, and for just going above and beyond to go to your senator, go to where the money may be, just for the love of your community. And the question is, how do we take it to like a Detroit police station that's so overwhelmed? We need our officers on the boots on the ground all day, every day. So how do we get it to them who we really can't stand to have them off the street for 8 hours? Or how do we suggest that? How do we?
So that is actually going on. They do have now where social workers are now tagging along with DPD. And there has been monies available or allocated toward that now. So that's actually in play now.
And Chief White is doing an amazing job. Chief White, he has my phone number. I talk to him quite a bit. He's doing an amazing job down there, and it's so much deeper than that. It's finding good people. It's recruiting good people. We have to be able to fire cops like that. I can tell you this. I've committed 2 of my cops. I've fired probably 5 or 6 people. I've arrested 3 of my own officers. You know why? Because they don't deserve to wear the uniform. Sorry. But we have to be, that's us. That's inside police work. I mean, I don't want to talk about that. It's another conversation. But we have to be, and it's about leadership. It's about finding good candidates. You know what? We got to pay candidates good money. We got to take care of them. We have to train them. There's so many different topics. So I'll save that. I know it's getting late. But if I'm over here. Well, thank you. Thank you.
Again, thank you all so much for being here this evening and talking through these difficult components and really addressing some of the factors that are impacting our children today. So to close, I would like to do one of my favorite just kind of relaxation grounding activities. I am a licensed clinical social worker. My day job is special education supervisor, so I do all that jazz regularly. But I would love to close with a tense and release activity. And so if you're comfortable, you're welcome to close your eyes. You don't have to, but if you could sit up straight in your seats with your feet flat on the floor. And just kind of start with inhaling and then give yourself a deep exhale. On your next inhale, ball up your feet if you can inside of your shoes. On the exhale, release and extend those toes. On the next inhale, tighten up those feet and those calves. Exhale and release. Inhale, tighten up those thigh and glute muscles. We tend to hold a lot of stress there. So on that exhale, give yourself a deep release. Next inhale, ball up your fists and your arms. Tighten as much as you can. Exhale, release, unball those and clench those fists. Inhale, bring those shoulders up towards your ears. Exhale and release. Inhale, scrunch up that space. Exhale, release. Next inhale, I want you to smile. Feel those muscles. Release. And just kind of take a second. You can say it out loud or in your mind. Just say thank you to yourself for being here today. We appreciate you all so much. I hope you learned a lot this evening, and we look forward to having you at our next community conversation.